up, everybody? This is Shane from Ferocious Fatherhood. I'm doing another 30 for 30 video. Today, I got Thomas from Clifton, New Jersey. He's a pastor out there at All Nations Worship Center. Thomas, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you so much, man. Listen, it is absolutely an honor being here with you guys. I'm super excited about this.
Yeah, man, I'm super excited. You and I were talking a little bit earlier. So, you and my wife knew each other. Y'all attended the
Yeah.
same FCA camp every single summer, or a
Yep.
couple of summers. And when
Mm-hmm.
I got talking to my wife about who we wanted to have on, I mean, you were right there at the top of the list, man. She was like, I know it. I got this dude for you. You guys are gonna be able to talk, no problem. Like, all right, cool, let's set it up, man.
Listen, it's absolutely an honor. Yeah, man. That FCA camp was I was on the basketball. I dealt with basketball, but they would always ask, "Hey, could we have some strong, burly guys?" Mind you, I'm like 5'9", 165 at that time. We need some strong, burly guys to help cheerleaders with their tumbling. Forget it. They had me in there. And they were like, "Listen, don't pick anybody up because you're too skinny for that. So we just need you to go like do some cartwheels and stuff." So that's how we met. And
hmm
then it just it blossomed from there. So, but I'm super honored, man. Thank you so much for thinking of me. I'm really honored, guys.
Yeah, man, absolutely. So take a moment, kind of introduce your pastor of your church, talk about your church, what y'all are doing, just
Yeah,
in the communities or whatever, man. Just talk about it for a minute.
yeah. So All Nations Worship Center, man. Again, we're a small church, and I say that because some people are like, oh, this person's a pastor, and they go look and they want to see like this mega church, and unfortunately, me and Joel Osteen, we're not friends, right? Like we're not connected like that, but we pastor a small church in Clifton, and we're actually going into the holiday season is one of those times where we get very busy and active. So we have an initiative called Thanksgiving in a Box where we really look to sort of affect food insecurity during the holidays. So one of the things we're doing right now, we are loading up. We're getting we give a full box Thanksgiving meal, everything from turkey all the way down to the seasonings. Man, we got salt, pepper, all that stuff in there. My wife is Puerto Rican, so you got to have the adobo, the sofrito, all that stuff in there. So we do all of that. And last year we gave away 110. Last year we gave away 110 boxes, and we did that in 16 minutes. Um,
Wow.
and yeah, it was crazy. We did it in 16 minutes. That's how fast it went. And there were people that we had to turn away because we just didn't have enough resources. So, this year our goal is to do 150. We're just doing it incrementally, but every year about 10,000 families in New Jersey go food insecure for the holidays. And so we're just trying to do our part, man, to really touch that. So that's one of the things that we do. But beyond that, we love to have our worship nights and we love to congregate and build people in the kingdom. I think that's the
hmm
important part. That's what essentially what we do at Team Nations. We call ourselves.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know those Thanksgiving in a box. We were on the receiving end of like a Thanksgiving in a box for military families. Man,
Oh
those things
wow,
make such a huge difference. Like it can
absolutely.
we they gave us like a whole box, a whole turkey and everything. And we just had all our friends over who weren't able to make it home for the holidays. And they just looked at us and were like, hey, thank you so much. And we're like, hey, we couldn't have done this if we weren't given it. So those
Wow,
those initiatives
wow.
like that, and those things are huge.
Yeah. And it's like I said, it's being food insecure is something that we think that it's just overseas. I'm 40, so I used to grow up seeing those commercials for Feed the Children with the sad looking African kids and stuff. But food insecurity affects people everywhere, even in this
Mhm.
nation.
Yeah.
So it's powerful when they do that stuff. So awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool, man. So what's kind of like your general background growing up in terms of, your childhood? Was your father in your life? You and I were talking earlier, so you currently have kids. How many kids you got? What ages you got?
Yeah. So I grew up. I mean, typical, pastor church background. I grew up in the church, so church boy for lack of a better term. But
Mhm.
grew up in the church. However, my dad wasn't really. He was in my life, but he was not a believer, right? So my dad was there. My mom was the one that took me to church. And so I spent time in church there. Really spent a lot of time in church. I was probably in church maybe 2, 3 times a week, or excuse me, 3 or 4 times a week. So I was always there, but my father's in my life. I grew up in church, I spent a lot of time doing athletics. I used to be very athletic before I gained that dad weight and that marriage weight. But I used to take part in a lot of sports, but I did grow up with my dad in my life. I was very fortunate to have that. I do have kids now. I got a 4-year-old son, and this kid is, God help me, 99th percentile for weight, 93rd percentile for height.
Wow.
Like the kid's just, he's a solid, I can't even wrestle with him no more because, he pinched the nerve in my neck like last year. I was like, you know what, I quit. We're done. So, so I have a 4-year-old Hulk for a son. And then I've got a 1-year-old, about 19 months, man, but she's really fast. Like she can scoot to the back of the house before I could take the crayon from her hand that she's been drawn all over the walls with. So that's my little one. And I'm fortunate to have one coming, man. My wife is 37 weeks and 4 days pregnant. So
Man,
yeah,
any
man,
minute,
like
huh?
right. Like if the knock on the door happens, if you see me throw the headphones down and I'm out, you just let everybody know, hey, his baby's coming, guys.
Yeah.
You know.
I was like, that'll be no problem there, man. You
Yeah,
gotta
yeah.
handle what you
Yeah.
gotta handle. If all of a sudden I
That's
see the
it.
look,
Listen.
I got
Yeah,
it.
if you see
I
that,
reckon
that
I
you know.
recognize
Yep.
that look. Yep.
Absolutely, man. So that's where I'm at right now in life. But that's kind of, quick, from where I was at until where I'm at now, as far as my life goes. But yeah, man, gonna be a dad of 3.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. So you said that you kind of grew up like your father was there, not as strong in your life as he could have been, but did you have any other sort of strong fatherly figures in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my dad was, he was there. It's just as far as church life, he wasn't there. Church life for sure, man. I think that was you know, one of the things that I ran into at my church was, which is unfortunately not the case in a lot of churches, is that our church at the church that I grew up in had a very strong male population who were active in the church. Typically, at least nowadays, you don't find a lot of the men active in church. It's usually the women that are active in church.
Mhm.
But we had the men active in church. My pastor had an armor bearer who. So I love basketball all day. It's favorite sport. It's God's sport, by the way. God's favorite sport. Um, some people ask like, how you know? The Bible says, lay up for yourself treasures in heaven. So and a layup is a basketball. So it's God's sport. Anyway, but my pastor's armor bearer was a 6'6", school teacher out of East Orange, New Jersey, subsequently, which is where we live. So you're talking, this athletic guy, but a teacher, school administrator, like he was that. So he was absolutely a force. And other men around there who, they were very active in church. They were active in the youth ministry. They were active in the kids ministry. So I saw that from a very young age, that as a man, my relationship with God is valuable, but also I serve. Like I'm here to lend of my talents to grow a community. And I learned that from them. But yeah, absolutely had some male figures in my life, church wise.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
It's definitely something. I don't think the church family is as strong as what it used to be. I definitely can remember growing up. I mean, I grew up in a real small town, like 400 people in the whole town, and like
Wow.
50 of them all went to this one church that was in our town, so everybody knew everybody. But it's
Yeah.
definitely that closeness. It's not as strong as what it used to be. I definitely agree with that.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a navigate. I think there's a reason for it, but there has been a navigation away from this, the organized faith as we've seen it. There's a reason, but unfortunately, that's what's starting to happen.
Hmm. Yeah, I do agree. So then, what were some of the major lessons that you learned from both your father and then as well as the strong figures that were in your church?
Yeah. So one of the things, I mean, my dad, first of all, my dad had me late in life. So my dad had me when he was 40.
Hmm.
And he recently passed away earlier this year. So
Oh man,
he
sorry to
was
hear that.
81. Thank you, man. It's bittersweet. I mean, he was 81, so he lived a full life,
Hmm.
but it's still that separation, right? That I feel
Hmm.
like that's my dad.
Hmm.
He's not here to celebrate. Like our third baby coming, he's not here to celebrate that. So
Yeah.
I feel those things, but at the same time, he lived a full life. Man, so he was almost 81 when he passed away. So you're talking, my dad was born in the 1940s. And so he came through the civil rights era as a black man. So you have to realize he wasn't afforded all the opportunities that I have now.
Mm-hmm.
But that the thing that he taught me was the value of working hard because he grew up in life. He had two brothers, and they lived below poverty. I still remember him telling me the story of how, you know, when I would complain about having to go to bed early, he'd be like, "Man, listen, we always used to want to go to bed early. Whoever got to the bed earliest got a chance to sleep on a safe part of the mattress because you got three boys trying to sleep in a full size bed with a hole in the middle of the mattress. So
Mm-hmm.
you wanted to get to bed early because if you were the last one to get in bed, you had to try to sleep over that hole in the middle. And so my dad came from that to providing a middle class life for me, and he worked for it. He was a foreman in a light bulb factory. Um, Mind you, he would come home every day and he would play piano and he would make music because he had a studio in the house. And so my dad had to forego his passion of music to
Mm-hmm.
work to give me a life that was better than sleeping in a mattress with a hole in the middle. You get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So he taught me the value of hard work. Like, hey, listen, if you want to have a good life, you need to work hard for what you want to do. You need to work hard to build the life that you want. So I got that from him. And that was something he taught to me just number one by doing. Because I used to complain that he didn't come to my basketball games and stuff when I was playing. Because everybody's a self-proclaimed beast, when they play sports as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted my dad to see me go to work. um, Subsequently, I'm 5'10". Yeah, it's not. I'm no beast in by any stretch of the imagination. But I wanted dad to be there, and the idea was, hey man, like, how come, you like, I want you to come to a game. I want you to come to a game. I didn't realize my dad was working double shifts, so he would be working
Mm-hmm.
16-hour days to provide a middle class life and to provide the tuition needed for me to go to a private school. Like
Wow.
that wasn't a consider. I'm not right now. I'm 12, man. I'm 11. I'm
Mm-hmm.
12. I'm not thinking about what that cost is. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
thinking about what my dad has to go through for me to have that. I'm only thinking about I want my dad here at my game. I wish he was at my game.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a balance there, but my dad taught me to value hard work for sure.
Man, that's awesome. I think every single father and male that I've talked to, I think every single one is like, my father taught me hard work, and man, that's got to be like ingrained in the male, you know, genes to just work
Yep,
as hard as we can.
yep,
Man, that's so important. So then, so
yep.
okay, so that was what your father taught you. What about the members that were of the church?
Yeah, um, number one, they taught me the value of a good suit. Like, listen, you come to church, get, Sunday best, like, get a good suit. So
Hmm.
they taught me the value of a good suit. They taught me the places to go. And as I got older, they were like, listen, these suits are nice, but now you need to get yourself a tailor. Because your pant legs are a little bit too wide. Let's go ahead and get you set. Like,
Hmm.
so we started, they taught me the value of a good suit. But aside from that, they really taught me the value of a relationship with God. And I think that's something that a lot of, we talk about this navigation away from church and organized faith and that sort of thing. I think that's one of the things that we're starting to miss is the value of relationship with God. Because if there's anyone that's going to teach me what it is to be a good father, it is Him, right?
Hmm.
Like it is God. So I think that is one of the difficulties that we face. But they taught me the value of a strong relationship with God. They taught me the value of serving my community. There's a lot of things that I learned, a lot of lessons that I picked up on, but that probably was the biggest one.
Yeah, that's all. It really sounds like you're continuing that legacy of service. You started your own church.
Mhm.
You and I were talking earlier that you have a full time job and you started a church. So definitely giving
Absolutely.
back. So then it really sounds like you really internalized that. So then how are you conveying that to your children?
Yeah. So I think there's two things. So number one, being a pastor, I talk a lot. So I got to talk all the time. I got to talk. I have a gift for it. It's fine. I'll do it. But I talk to my children, and it's funny when some people they hear my 4-year-old talk, And they're like, how old is he? I'm like, 4. And they're like, no way he's 4. Like, yeah, he's 4, and he speaks very intelligently for a 4-year-old.
Hmm.
And that is a result of my wife and I, we talk to him like he's older than 4. Like, we don't baby talk him. We explain stuff. Like, he'll ask me, why is the sky blue? And I'm like, well, because the sun comes across the atmosphere a certain way and particles and this and that. And he probably doesn't understand half of it, but then later on I hear him say stuff like, hey dad, what particles are over here? And I'm like, he was listening. He was listening. So I absolutely communicate a lot of that stuff to him verbally. But the other part is that, the activity has to match that, right? So what I communicate to him verbally, I want it to become a mentality. I want him to
Hmm.
understand that. But the activity has to match the mentality. So
Hmm.
if I am speaking it, I also need to act it. So when I talk about the value of hard work, the pandemic really helped my son see me work from home. And so he understood, like, I have an office which I'm in, which is why you see like the door and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Um, I want to travel. That's why this is up here in the back. But like, my son would see me work. He would hear me on the phone with business clients. I'm a business banker, so he would hear me on the phone with business clients. I would tell my clients, "Hey, we're working from home," and the clients like, "We understand. My dog's in the back," and I'm like, "Well, my son's over here in the back," and they would that interaction. He would see me working,
Hmm.
and he would know Daddy is out here grinding to make sure that the family needs are met. Because at the end of the day, that's one of my roles as a father, is to provide for my son, is to provide for my daughter, is to provide for my future babies, to provide for my wife. I literally have to create the proper environment that is most conducive to their growth, and that includes me going out, bringing home stuff to build the house with.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, that.
so so they see that in my activity, as well as the stuff that I express about mentality.
Hmm. Yeah, that's also one of the things that we try with my son Jeremiah. We try getting him to observe us doing stuff, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's setting up stuff with Ferocious Fatherhood, or I'll take him to the gym with me as much as I can. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it makes working out. My hour workout takes an hour and a half now, but to
Absolutely.
me, that's so much more important for him to see me being healthy, and then to come home and not just stuff my face with fried food, to see me eating
Mm-hmm.
chicken, see me eating vegetables and fruit, stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I think that's a huge thing that a lot of men miss. I think that they can just tell their kids, hey, this is what you have to do, without that action to back it up.
Yeah.
And that's not the case. Like, there's
Yeah.
nothing that I can tell my son, hey, this is the way we need to do it. That if my actions are contradicting it, that he won't understand it. He just will not get it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there is a value to, let me say it like this. I think that as men and as fathers, I don't think that we are that cognizant of what we're supposed to do. And there's not a lot of purpose behind fatherhood. I say this, and I'm one of these people that I'm big on purpose, and I'm big on having a why, and understanding, if you're doing something, why are you doing it?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I think things are just the next step. So as we get older, we see people with kids, and so we assume, get married and then have kids and then grow old and then retire and then your kids bury you and life goes on. It's a cycle. But I think if we actively understand what that process is, as a father, when I birth like my 2 children, I'm going to have 3 kids now. My understanding has to be that those 3 children are going to affect the next generation. Like, the
Mm-hmm.
next generation that's coming up, my children are going to have to make their mark, and they're going to make an impact. So then I have to actively understand, what is it that I'm communicating to them that's going to make them successful?
Mm-hmm.
Because when I do that, it causes me to move differently in my daily life. It causes me to not just come home and give my child an electronic device so that I can go do what I want to do. No,
Mm-hmm.
the time for doing what you want to do with no regard to anyone else around you left when you were single, right?
Mm-hmm.
It left when you were by yourself. Now as a father, if you're married, you have your wife, of course. But even if you're a single father, you now have your children to think about. So when you were single, you got a one bedroom apartment, you even got a studio because it didn't matter to you.
Hmm.
But if you're a single father and you have two kids, and your kids are 12 and 9, you got to get a three-bedroom apartment.
Hmm.
That requires you to think about the type of job that you do. That requires you to think about the type of business that you run. That requires you to think about a lot of stuff. I have a son. I've got to tell him what masculinity is because he's got to understand his identity as a, you see what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
like I start to think how deep it gets. And it's not just, oh, hey, I wake up on a Saturday morning and I go do what I want to do. I now have to curate time and space for my son to see me doing masculine things and what masculinity is.
Hmm.
Not toxic masculinity,
Hmm.
masculinity. You get what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah. And there's definitely a huge difference between those two. And then
Absolutely.
you talked about something, in that just now, that multi-generational impact that you have as fathers, that's huge. Like that, I'm directly influencing my child. When my child has a kid, if I'm still alive, which I hope to be, I'm going to be influencing my grandkids. And then right there, you've directly influenced two generations, and then your grandkid is going to directly influence two generations. You've indirectly, influenced four. I mean, over, if the average person lives 80 years, you're essentially influencing, God knows how many years, 300
Yep.
years right there or something.
Yep. Yep. Listen, I'm in the thrust of, I'm literally in the middle of this study on Abraham, and it's one of these that when you look in the Bible and you see Abraham, like all the book of Genesis is all about Abraham, his lineage and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But Abraham literally comes out. Abraham is a sheep herd, like he's a shepherd, he's a sheep herder. He deals with livestock and all of that stuff. And it's crazy that that's what he chose to do. That's what he came out with. And when Joseph, if you reading the book of Genesis, Joseph at the end of Genesis goes into the service of Pharaoh, the king, when his family comes over, literally Pharaoh's like, well, what are your family good at? He's like, well, they're shepherds. Pharaoh's like, oh, hey, I got livestock. Put your family in charge of my livestock. Like, to think about that, the decision that Abraham made to choose shepherding as his job, as his vocation, gave his family access to royalty 4 generations later. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what you
Wow.
said is so true. You are affecting, you have no idea the choices, the small choices that you make, such as, career, professions, things like that, may affect your generations down the road. 4 generations, you know what it is to set your family up 4 generations deep so that they're now standing in front of royalty. That's powerful. And I think as fathers, we have to see that what you said, right, that multi-generational viewpoint. Like I'm not looking at what I'm doing for me. I'm
Mm-hmm.
looking at what I'm doing for my children's children, right? My children's children's children.
Mm-hmm.
What are my great grandkids going to see? I've got to think that way.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And when you start to think that way, all of a sudden it's so easy to get up off the couch and teach your kids something. It's so easy. All of a sudden, Netflix doesn't mean anything.
Nope.
I can sit down and no, it means nothing to me. All of a sudden, picking up a book and having my child, see me reading, that now takes on a whole new role, and reading to him takes on a whole new.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. My son reads on a second grade level. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not sitting here being like, oh, I'm the best, because my wife was the one that really worked with him to make sure that he was reading. But my son reads so well. And it's funny because we'll do stuff. And if I'm like, hey, Poppy, no tablet right now, he'll be like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, he'll go get a book. Could you read this to me? I bought him Shark Week came. I couldn't walk into a CVS with him during Shark Week. He loves sharks. And so when they had the magazines with sharks on it, he was picking up, look, this is this type of shark, that type of shark, this type of shark. He's telling me what the types of sharks are. And then he's reading the tiger shark is, and he's reading the words. I'm sitting here like, my son's a genius. Like, of course, because all our kids are geniuses. But like, I'm like, my son's intelligent because there's value in reading. Like, I show
Mm-hmm.
him that. And I think that's important because as he gets older, he's going to need to read to gain information and knowledge that he never would have. You see what I'm saying? Like
Mm-hmm.
that thought process around who my son will need to be successful in his life. is extremely important for us as fathers. I think that's so valuable. I think that
Hmm.
is something that we have lost as fathers because we just don't consider that.
Hmm. Yeah, I do agree with you. That's awesome that your child is able to, pick up those magazines. Oh, look, tiger shark is, and
Yeah.
great white is it. That's awesome.
Yeah.
My son's doing it with dinosaurs right now. He picks it up and is like, this is a Parasaurolophus, and I'm like, how? I
Yeah.
can't even read that. How did you read that?
Right. He corrected me the other day. I was like, look, puppy, this is a He was like, no, dad, Pachycephalosaurus. Say it right. I was like, you know what? I don't even want to talk about dinosaurs anymore. How about we talk about financial markets? How about that? Like I had an attitude for a minute.
Why don't you
But
come into my
it's
world for a minute here?
yeah,
We'll
I'm like,
start
yeah,
talking
how about
stocks and markets.
yeah, let's talk about I bet you don't know what the interest rate for the 10-year, 90-day treasury bill is, do you? Like, I had an attitude for a second, but it's awesome to see like just and I'm being honest as a dad, like to see the wonder in his eyes. Even when we go to aquariums, he's like, "Ooh, look!" And he starts naming the types of sharks in the water. Like my face, man, is just I light up because that's what I want for my son to be excited about the world around him and what he sees. And I think as a dad, I have an obligation to provide that.
Hmm. Yeah,
For
I do,
sure.
and it's seeing those little things that like your son all of a sudden is able to start
Yeah.
picking up on that you've taught him. That reward, I mean,
Oh,
that's the best reward I've ever gotten. I
absolutely,
mean,
absolutely.
seeing my son be able to, I mean, like I said, just look at a dinosaur book. Oh, this is a blah blah blah. Like, wow, man, that's so cool. Or correct me, like man, that is so
Yeah.
cool.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Man, that's awesome. That's awesome. So what are some of like the hardest problems that you face as a father?
Um. I mean, this really is. I think it's this is there's multi layers to that. I
Hmm.
think the biggest thing that I face as a father right now is understanding that from at least my standpoint, right? This may not be this doesn't affect everybody, but from my standpoint, I am a black man married to a Hispanic woman, and I have a child who is bicultural,
Hmm.
who is American culture and Puerto Rican culture. But I also have a son who is biracial, so he is a black and he's also Puerto Rican or Hispanic Latino.
Hmm.
Um, and the stereotypes that simply come with my skin tone, um, or and the stereotypes that come with his mom's culture, he will now face both.
Hmm.
And as a father, it is increasingly difficult for me to express to my son. I can express the value and the all the greatness it is of being a black male, of being a Puerto Rican male because he's both. I can
Hmm.
explain just how good it is, but when he goes out into the world doesn't necessarily echo that sentiment all the time.
Sure.
And I think the challenge, and I haven't really come up on this fully,
Hmm.
but because he's 4, right? So he's only had so much, and we've been in a pandemic, so he's only had so much interaction outside. But
Hmm.
as he grows up, I'm gonna have to start to have more of those conversations. Right now, he's proud of his, what we call Afro Latinidad, right? His, being African and African American and Latin mixed, but I know I'm going to have to deal with that. My daughter, same thing. I know I'm going to have to deal with those things. Um, and I need my children to know that there's no problem with that. So I think that for me, overcoming the stereotypes so that, for my children to understand that we've overcome or that those stereotypes are not true or that that's not true about us. I think those battling that is a very difficult thing for me. I can show my son that everything's that we are hardworking, that we value those things, that we value growth, we value development, that we're not what the stereotype says. I could show my son that. I need him to grasp that, and that's really individual to him.
Oh wow. Yeah, I mean I think you may definitely have a challenge ahead of you with that. I mean that's a lot to kind of unpack
Yeah, yeah,
there.
and that's why I said like it's this.
Hmm.
That's what we were talking right now. I was like, man, this is these are long conversations, man. This is not. We're not gonna clear this out in 20 minutes. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
this is,
Uh-huh.
it's there's so much to that dynamic because even me when I was younger. And I went to, Lehigh University, and they have, you write essays. And one of the things that I wrote in my essay is, I am a black male that has to fight against the stereotype about black males. When I'm coming to school learning finance because I need to battle that stereotype. That's one of the things I need to do. So now in my everyday life, I've got to battle that stereotype. But my son has to now battle stereotypes that may come up about him, right? And it's different, I think. And again, we talked about, right, what a father has to do. As a dad, I really have to have future sight. I have to be able to navigate some of the waters for my son. He's going to have to navigate the rest, because at some point I'm not necessarily going to be here. At some point, my advice is not going to be, you know, current. My advice is going to be from years ago, right? My dad gave me advice that was from, it was bad, man. So you got to realize, my dad had me at 40. Like, you got to understand what it is to have an older father give birth to me, and then I try to go in and try to be cool with everybody and use the stuff that my dad said. Like, if somebody's like, "How are you?" Good. How are you? Right? It's nice and simple. You ask my dad, like, "Hey man, how are you?" My dad would say something like, "Everything's chicken but the bone." So now, right, imagine me, an 8-year-old, saying that to another 8-year-old. They're like, "What? What is that? What does that mean?" I don't know what it means. I just know that it means good. So I can't explain what everything's chicken but the bone. I don't know. I still don't know what that means. I'm 40 now. I don't know what that means. Right? Like, my dad would say stuff that was just outdated, man. Like, it was, and I know I'm gonna share stuff with my son that eventually is just gonna be outdated. So I've gotta be able to give him concepts. I've got to be able to give him mentalities, mindsets that transcend time, that allow him to say, no matter what, I might be a black and brown boy, but I have just as much value as the next person. I have just as much value as this person. We all have value, right? Because it's not just I'm better than you or I'm better than you think. It's we all have value. We all bring something to the table. God created us because all of us have something to bring to the earth, you and me included. Don't devalue me because of the color of my skin, and I won't devalue you because of the color of your skin. Let's bring our gifts to the table and improve the world that we live in. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I
I
think
need
that's
him to
very well
understand that.
said. Yeah, that's very well said. I definitely think that we have to get talking to people who are different than us, who do share different ideological beliefs, or who do share, just any belief that's different in general. And we have to figure out a way that we can kind of put those aside and just be able to work together towards a common goal. I mean, that's
Absolutely.
ultimately what it is. I mean, we can, as a Christian, I want other people to be Christian, but even if you're not Christian, I'm not going to, shun you or turn you away or, whatever. We have to be able to, agree to disagree on certain things and just move on from there.
Yep. Listen, I say this, and I've the more I've studied about Jesus Christ and the people that he chose, the more I begin to realize he didn't choose Pharisees who were in Jerusalem away from everything, sort of in this wall. He chose the disciples. Most of them were fishermen. So these are people who lived around the Sea of Galilee, where 4 countries merged together. Like, these people lived at the intersection of faith, culture, and marketplace. They were Jews that were God's chosen people, but still had to do business with Gentiles who were not God's chosen people. And so their sustenance came from people who were not God's chosen people. So they had to understand how to deal with them, how to say, yes, I might be Hebrew, yes, I might have this culture, but I still have to interact with you. I still have to be on good terms with you because you have something that I value. I have something that you value. And so when we start to understand that, my faith doesn't blind me to your value simply because you don't share my faith, right? And my son has to realize and recognize, and we realize and recognize, your skin. I'm not blinded to your value because of your skin color. I refuse to be blinded, and I don't want you to be blinded to my value because of my skin color, right? We all bring something to this planet. Let's release it and make, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's the,
Absolutely.
so I want my son, I want my daughter to understand that too. I want, all of my kids to understand that, because at the end of the day, we're here to grow, develop people, and leave an impact on this earth that is positive.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things that, as I start to grow in my faith, is I start to see, like, I was raised non-Catholic in a non-Catholic environment, and there's a very man, that like Catholics and non-Catholics, they don't always get along. And that was something that, like, through Brittany and my conversation, because Brittany was, raised Catholic, that we start to like see like, hey, all this other stuff that outside of you believe in Jesus, you believe in God, outside of those two things, we have to put those differences aside. And I think that we as fathers, we have to do that as well. We have to put everything aside except raising our kids to be better citizens than what we were. And
Yep.
ultimately, I think we really need to do that.
Yeah, I think the one of the biggest things that another one of the challenges that we run into, and I know I run into, and I can say this I could say this with 100% certainty that we all go through, is that I have to raise my son, and all men have to raise their son or their children. I shouldn't just say son, but we have to raise our children better than we were raised.
Yeah.
And I say better than we were raised because there is a lot of trauma that men have gone through and have experienced being raised with their fathers, because their fathers raised, and each generation does it. We raise our children based on our experiences that we've had. So I'm 40, right? I had my son when I was 35. So I got to raise my son, and I have to do my best to give him my experience, because that's what we do. I'm gonna raise you. I'm gonna give you my experience. I'm gonna share with you what I learned, and
Mm-hmm.
and I'm gonna give it to you. But the stuff that I went through as a boy, my son he may not go through, right?
Mm-hmm.
So because he's not gonna go through it, if I just give it to him like I got it, I'm doing him a disservice. So
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that we've dealt with as men is real men, like, this men are not emotional creatures. And it's something that's still talked about today, that men are not real men don't cry, men are not emotional. And what that's done is that's created a lot of men who are not emotionally intelligent. And
Mm-hmm.
so these men that, that don't understand their emotions, that don't understand how to express it, they hear men aren't emotional. So when we feel an emotion, we don't know what to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
So when that happens, we either bottle it up, or we explode, or we incorrectly express it. Now we hurt ourselves, we hurt the relationships around us, which typically these things are revealed in marriage,
Mm-hmm.
dating relationships, and ultimately they reveal themselves in childhood relationships. So for example, my dad, and again, my dad loved my dad 100%, but my dad was very authoritarian in the house, where it was kind of like, and we, in the Black culture, we always say this, like, you don't talk back, like, you don't say nothing to mom or dad, like, you just,
Mm-hmm.
that's it. And I think the thing about that is, when you don't talk back, for me, I realize I don't have nothing to say. If mom or dad say it, that's it. We have nothing else. Doesn't matter how I feel. Doesn't matter if they're dead wrong. We just leave it at that. Um, and so that created in me someone who was non-confrontational. So
Mm-hmm.
now, if a confrontation arose, I don't want to fight. I just don't want to deal with that. You're right, but that's not healthy. So
Mm-hmm.
now I feel like, and this is just me going through my process, right? This was me going through my process, and so because of that, I feel like I'm never heard now, because whenever somebody has an opposite opinion, I don't say anything. So now I don't feel heard. So when my son he's born and my daughter is born, now the only two people who can't talk back to me are my kids.
Mm-hmm.
So I become this authoritarian figure, and I
Mm-hmm.
start to boom, boom, and I start to now I can see how I am I am dampening my son and my daughter's leadership ability, because I'm telling them they can't think for themselves. I'm telling them that what you think is dead wrong. And all of that stuff is just based out of how I was raised. Well, why would your dad do that to you, Thomas? Why would your dad do that? My dad grew up in the civil rights era, where for a Black person, you were seen and not heard. You didn't make
Mm-hmm.
noise in public. You didn't do that. So now, because of that, you see what I'm saying? But this is
Mm-hmm.
something that is throughout the Black culture, where it's like, we don't talk back to mom and dad. You don't. So we've created this, we've unintentionally repressed our children, and our children either retreat within themselves and become non-confrontational, or they become super confrontational.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I teach my child based out of my trauma, I damage him. And I
Mm-hmm.
think as men, this is not just Black and brown men, this is all over. All of us as men, if we fail to stop, like if we fail to self-reflect and to gain emotional intelligence and to understand we're emotional creatures, we feel this. Like let's feel this. we will carry on a cycle into our children, and they will be unfit for the society in which they will live because they will have
Mm-hmm.
zero emotional intelligence. They will have been raised from my trauma, and will have generations of, we will wound our children the same way we were wounded. And as
Mm-hmm.
a dad, we cannot do that. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Yeah, man.
So I think
That
that's dangerous.
mm-hmm. Man, that's such a good point. And you're talking about like the emotional. You know, you hear it all the time. You know, men aren't emotional creatures, whatever. And then you're exactly right. When you get married, and then you have to, um, there are other emotional, like wives are just generally they can be more emotional. And now that I don't have that ability to handle my own emotions, I'm not going to have that ability to handle my wife's emotions. And that was
Mm-hmm.
something that was really big in Brittany's and my, earlier years. I growing up heard the same thing. Be strong, you're a man. And now that me and Brittany, Brittany brings emotional when she gets her emotions involved and stuff. I don't always know how to handle it. I'm always just sometimes we're just kind of like shut down and or like do whatever she wants to do, and then I'll repress something, or I'll explode, be like, "Well, why are you doing it that way? That doesn't make sense. That defies logic," or whatever. And it's just not the case, you know.
You sound you sound like me and my wife. We've had this conversation like, and I'm talking. So we've been married. This coming April will be 10 years of marriage. So it's crazy having this conversation. It's so funny because you sound like us. Like we went through a really dark period in our marriage where we almost didn't make it, and I'm a lot of it. First of all, the pandemic really helped us, but a lot of it is a lot of that is we don't understand what to do. Like we're like, wait a minute, what? Huh? How? Why are you talk? What do you mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's simple because typically what we do as men, we have the emotion and then we don't. It's a wrap.
Mm-hmm.
Like we feel it, we push it away. Or if you're like me, which I'm more emotional than most men, it'll happen to me and I'll just hold it. And I'll be mad with you for I don't know how long until we can talk it out and I can say my piece, right? But I'll be mad with
Mm-hmm.
you for days. Some people just they have it and they get rid of it. They're over it and that's it. But then when a woman holds on to it, because we talk about when men are like, I'm gonna say my piece and I'm done. Women will be like, I'm gonna say my piece, but I'm gonna keep going because just
Mm-hmm.
because you said sorry, don't make me feel better. I gotta keep going. And it's like sometimes we argue until we feel better. We don't argue until the argument's done.
Mm-hmm.
And so when that happens, we as men, we don't know how to deal. We don't know how to deal with it. We're like, oh, wait a minute, what? Huh? Like we get all
Mm-hmm.
flustered because we don't have the emotional intelligence to deal with the situation. We endanger ourselves. And do you understand? Like the flip side of that is when we're like men are logical, women are emotional. We put this stereotype on them, right? And now you've got women who are more logical, who have logical mindsets, but we dismiss them. So
Mm-hmm.
now imagine dismissing your logical and very analytical wife because you were told women are emotional and your wife's not that emotional. Your wife's like one, two, three, four, I'm boom, 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 like that. You
Mm-hmm.
dismiss her, you can literally destroy your marriage. What about your children? You dismiss your children when you find like my son is a hyper emotional creature. He's like me. I can't, it is what it is. But he's a hyper emotional creature. I can't dismiss his. So one of the values that we put in place as a family now, because it used to just be when you started, no crying. What, you crying? No. Pop, no. You crying? No, no, no. We can't do that now. Now my son has to understand your feelings are valid. Your emotions are
Mm-hmm.
valid. I know you're upset. I know you wanted to get that toy in the store. I know you're upset. I know you're frustrated, but your behavior is not. You will not lay on the floor. You will not jump up and down. You will not stomp your feet. You can express your emotions in a healthy way and
Mm-hmm.
express your feelings in a healthy way with mommy and daddy. And we will listen to you. We won't dismiss you. But what will not happen, you know what I mean? Like it's sort of that
Absolutely.
conversation. People hear us in public and they're just like, wow, you guys are so good with him. It's like, it's not that and he'll be like, I'm upset. And we're like, okay, why are you upset? We'll have a conversation in public about him being upset. People are like, oh my God, that was such a great. No, we value our son's emotions. So when he turns 15
Mm-hmm.
or 16 and he says, I don't want to go to that college, he can accurately express why versus getting upset, slamming his door and going to his room. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying?
I do, man. That's such a good point, and I think I'm just going to kind of wrap it up with that, man. That is so good. But one thing before you go, one thing I like to ask every person on the show: what's one last piece of advice that you want to give to fathers out there?
Um, do not, do not, do not neglect self-reflection. There is an inherent ability as men. Once we get as we start achieving stuff, we don't look back on how we could have done better. We don't
Hmm.
look back on how we could have been better. And so when we get married, we don't look at all the stuff that we did wrong, or all the ways that we don't look at our. So we succeeded, we move on.
Hmm.
Do not neglect self-reflection. Whether you win or whether you lose, look at how you could have done better, if not for yourself, for the next generation, because your son is going to need to understand where you failed and the things that you could have done better, even
Hmm.
with them, right? Like, you do not neglect self-reflection. Take that time, 5 minutes, 10 minutes every day. And if you fail with your kids, don't be afraid to say sorry. Like, own up to that, and then, talk about ways to do better. But self-reflection is powerful for fathers.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and we do not do that enough as fathers. You can set your kids up so much better than what you're being set up if you can just accurately self-reflect on
Hmm.
what went wrong throughout the day and be able to adjust that.
Yep,
Man,
for
Thomas, I
sure.
love this conversation, man. Thank you so much for coming on. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, just thanks, brother. I absolutely loved it. I literally can't say anything else, man.
Well, listen, thank you for having me, man. Once again, I mean, it's just a honor, to be mentioned and thought of for this. 1,000%, man. I had a lot of fun, and I
Mhm.
love these things. But like I said, man, this conversation is like long, man. This is, I'm glad that you're doing what you're doing. I can't wait to see the other episodes that are
Mhm.
coming out, the other men that are up there. So, but again, thank you so much, man. Honored to be with you guys today.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thank you, and I'm definitely going to have you back on so we can expand on some of the stuff that we weren't able to expand on, man.
For sure, for sure. Sounds good, man.
All right, brother. Thank you, man. I really appreciate it.
All right, take care.
All right, take care, man.